study of identity is complicated as it is a broad subject that is impacted by many factors such as our families and backgrounds to class, culture, race and ethnicity. According to David Buckingham, identity implies both similarity and difference. Identity is something unique to each of us that we assume is more or less consistent, yet on the other hand, identity also implies a relationship with a broader collective or social group of some kind. Our identity is partly a matter of what we share with other people. This presentation aims to cover some key ideas within the topic of identity. Jenkins' definition states identity is our understanding of who we are and who other people are, and reciprocally other people's understanding of themselves and of others, which includes us. It is synthesizing relationships of similarity and difference, the outcome of agreement and disagreement, and at least in practice, always negotiable. Identification is not fixed. Jenkins' definition acknowledges that we rely on others' view to define ourselves. It is this idea of belonging and being part of a group that makes us relatable. Our identities are being shaped from an early age. Our families set our values and beliefs, but as we grow up and start to make sense of life, these views alter, and so Jenkins' point about identification not being fixed is accurate. As we go through different experiences in life and develop our understanding of the world, the things we relate to will change. Beverly Tatum says, in The Complexity of Identity, the answer depends in large part on who the world around me says I am, which shows that we depend on our surroundings, which can mean different aspects of life to impact on how we see ourselves. According to Lawler, the very constitution of an identity is configured over time and through narrative. Identity is profoundly social and is continually interpreted and reinterpreted. The self does not know itself immediately, but only indirectly by the detour of the cultural signs which are articulated on the symbolic mediations. Symbolic mediation referred to by Lawler is similar to George Mead, in which he states, identity is a social process and the individual forms his identity through process of interaction and communication with conflicts and anomalies. Lifelong influence of others affect the development and control of our identity. Therefore, symbols in society teach us to understand the world and create attachment to things that have a meaning to us. We begin to form symbols from a young age through family, for instance, religion, as well as cultural symbols. This relates to Charles Cooley's The Looking Glass self-concept. He states that other people are the mirror in which we see ourselves. The image powerfully demonstrates that we form a different image of ourselves depending on how we think certain people see us. Hirsch noticed that not many people looked like her at school, and from a young age this impacted on how she saw herself. So although she had a very good standard of living, she faced a conflict within herself. Daniel Tatum states, the part of our identity that do capture our attention are those that other people notice and that reflect back to us. Race is an important fact to mention in relation to identity, especially as the UK is a very mixed country with multiple ethnicities that integrate together in communities and everyday life. This in itself impacts on identity because ethnic backgrounds will have their separate views and ways of doing things. Gauntlet says ethnicity is more or less central to self-identity by each individual, or might be made significant by external social circumstance. The Education and Poverty Review states that evidence shows family background continues to be a major determinant of educational outcome for children. Race also creates stereotypes within society, and labeling theory suggests that self-identity and behavior of individuals may be determined or influenced by the terms used to describe or classify them. For example, in an educational setting, labeling can be damaging, as stated by O'Byrne 2011. If a teacher makes an initial judgment on a pupil, which labels that pupil in a negative way, perhaps as a troublemaker, then the pupil is likely to internalize the label. This also refers to Cooley's idea of the looking glass self, and they will act accordingly. Meanwhile, the teacher is more likely to invest her or his energies in those pupils she or he sees as more intellectually worthy, and necessarily the negatively labelled pupil fails owing to a lack of attention. Thus, the labelling becomes another kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. This relates back to Hirsch's example of her partner reading voraciously devouring books in a world where he was expected to be stupid, so it meant he had to work twice as hard to prove himself, and this risks an identity crisis. Another very important factor in development of our identity is our education, especially as we go to school full time from the age of 4 until 18 and spend most of the day at school. It is a clear challenge to assess to what degree our education offers social justice. According to Emma Smith, social justice is a major preoccupation of the politicians who play a central role in deciding what is taught in our schools, where it is taught, to whom, and by whom. This shows that different political views can impact the purpose of schooling. Both left and right policymakers have agreed that without good education, there can be no social justice, and that education can be the way out of poverty. But realistically, the ideologies of these political parties can impact our education system. According to Bell 2016, social justice can be viewed as both a process and a goal, and that the process of social justice should involve democracy and dialogue, enabled by opportunities to critically examine institutional, cultural, and individual oppression. Goals for social justice include empowerment, equal distribution of resources, and social responsibility. Unlike the official curriculum documents, curriculum traditions, values, and norms are part of the hidden curriculum imposed by these political views. This raises the issue to what social justice actually means, as it can be interpreted differently depending on individual views. According to Smith, equality of opportunity is part of social justice, and the role of schooling is to provide everyone with an education that will equip them with an equal opportunity to compete in life's race. The downside to this is that it does not consider the role a family has on a child's education. Some parents are themselves educated and can support their child's development, whereas others are unable to help with simple homework tasks. The reality is there is inequality in our education, and the issues of justice are complicated. Adams, Bell, and Griffin state that one way of enacting social justice pedagogies involves the teacher explicitly teaching about social justice with an aim to increase student consciousness and capacity for addressing social justice issues. This enables students to understand more from a younger age. As well as this, education should seek to support different talents, and by doing so will help enable individuals to reach their full potential. Another impact of social justice is class. This has an impact on education as well as identity. It is about the division within society that is based on social and economic status. According to the Education and Poverty Review in 2007, the socially critical perspective outlines clearly the view that the relationship between poverty and education is unlikely to be disturbed unless fundamental issues of power and interest, advantage and disadvantage are addressed. Simply tackling the presenting problems of poverty and education will, this perspective suggests, ultimately prove to be ineffective if underlying qualities are permitted to reproduce these problems in other forms. It is not just enough to try and improve the lives of some people by offering more resources or more support within their education. More work needs to be done within the policy of education to understand different needs of children from different social backgrounds. This requires schools to focus on the holistic needs of young people. Furthermore, opportunities for social mobility are one aspect of an individual's life chances. Depending on which class we are within society, this will indicate many aspects of our identity. For instance, if individuals come from working class families that live on council estates and have free school meals, they are already placed in a group within school that makes them aware of what is expected of them. These factors all feed into our image of ourselves and future prospects. Formosa and Higgs state class inequalities in one generation bleed over into the next, with the class position of parents influencing the prospects of their children, shaping their children's chances of infant mortality, the risk of ill health and disability, and their success in school and in the labour market. This doesn't just relate to financial aspects of class, but also cultural knowledge, values, modes of social interaction, which are powerful predictors of important life outcomes. Today, media plays a very major role in our everyday lives. According to the government statistics, people in Europe and USA typically spend 3 or 4 hours per day watching TV. In the Future Identities Review by the government, they state that social media offer new opportunities for sharing self-presidential content or branding oneself online. Myrick and Boyd highlights one of the tensions associated with identity and social media, the desire to be authentic, contrasted with the need to speak to multiple audiences. Multiple identities are enabled in online spaces, and these identities may or may not correspond to one's offline identity. In media, people have more ability to expand, manipulate, multiply, and distort identities they present to others. It is the eternal fascination of drama that we can see how the world works in lives other than our own. Magazines aimed at women, and increasingly those for men, contains all kind of advice on how to live, look, and interact. Furthermore, Neil Postman stated that all public discourse increasingly takes the form of entertainment. Our politics, religion, news, athletics, education, and commerce have been transformed into congenial adjuncts of show business. Furthermore, White and Wynne state having the right visual identity is constantly being sought by youths as they succumb to pressures of having a desirable body or self-image. Apart from cosmetic surgery, youths choose identities through capital consumerism. Designer clothes, accessories, and technology gadgets are purchased by youths, all in the name of creating identities to fit in with their peers. They aid in the formation of identities. There is intense pressure to conform to groups of majority and wanting to be accepted, and that could be observed from various cliques in schools. This is a perfect example of how early on we want to fit in certain groups, but this can also create a conflict or identity crisis at such a young age. This can result in teenagers resorting to drugs or other criminal activity to fund this kind of lifestyle in order to fit in with the popular crowd.